Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about Dark Eldar Scourges in a Craftworld Eldar Ynnari army. And funnily enough, Scourges, in my opinion, work better in a Ynnari army than they actually do in a real Dark Eldar list. And that's simply because of the fact that there's so many cool synergies between Dark Eldar units and Eldar buffs. So what we're going to be doing in today's video is analyzing those synergies and talking about why Scourges are probably one of the best units for a Ynnari army to take. And if you are running a Ynnari army and you're not running Scourges, I think this video might just change your mind. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right into it. But first, a quick overview of what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at the stats, weapons, and special rules of the Scourges, their strengths and weaknesses, combos and synergies, and of course, the role Scourges play in an Eldar army and how to make the most out of them. So looking at their stats, they're pretty fast. They basically have the same movement as Swooping Hawks. They have a 4+ save and a 5+ invulnerable save. So basically the same durability as Swooping Hawks as well. As for their ranged weapons, this is truly where they shine. They have a myriad of ranged weapons to choose from. The Solarite can take a blast pistol, which is essentially just, kind of like a fusion pistol a little bit, except a little bit less AP. The Blaster is an assault weapon. Basically, it's an assault version of the Dark Lance, but with much less strength. So, mostly effective against heavy infantry or light vehicles or monsters. The Dark Lances are, of course, what people usually take with these guys, and they are very superb anti-large weapons that can shoot from a safe distance. So that 36-inch range, you couple that with the fact that Scourges can move and shoot, and you have one of the best weapon platforms in the entire game. They can also take Haywire Blasters, which are a little bit more risky because they have shorter range, but are very effective against vehicles, dealing mortal wounds. The Heat Lances are extremely short range. They're 18 inches, but have Melt to 3 when they're within half range, and insane strength at 14. So if you're going against anything super tough, toughness 12 or above, Heat Lances are going to do much more damage. But you do have to cross that ground, so that is a risk you take with the Heat Lance. The Shard Carbine is basically their standard weaponry, has shorter range, anti-infantry, 3+, and has assault. So not the weapon you'd usually take unless you're taking a larger unit and you've already maxed out on special weapons. Shredders are great anti-infantry with Torrent, so not having to roll to hit is great. They have assault, so they can obviously advance and shoot. Strength 6, AP 0, though, is not that great, right? They have a little bit more strength than something like a Death Spinner, but no AP and no devastating wounds. So they're not going to punch through armor very well. We got the Splinter Cannon as well, which is great at shredding medium infantry targets at long range, mech equivalents, etc., and work great when paired with Blade Storm. So this is a combo I'm going to talk about later in this video, but basically because they're poisoned weapons and they have sustained 1, every shot that wounds with Blade Storm, and of course that's an Eldar stratagem that you can use on Scourges, you will get a -2 AP modifier. So you're going to be hitting at -3 AP base on these guys with Blade Storm, and you can couple it obviously with some other buffs for pretty insane anti-infantry damage. The Solarite can also take a Splinter Pistol. This is just the basic option, just, essentially an anti-infantry 3+ pistol. Although you're usually going to take the Shard Carbine on the Solarite. In close combat, they're armed with basic close combat weapons, so not terrible. They have 2 attacks apiece. They're not the worst close combat unit in the game, but they're pretty close. And the Solarite has an Agonizer, essentially, which is an anti-infantry 3+ weapon at AP -1. As for their special rules, they have Deep Strike, which is great utility. Means they can deep strike onto the board wherever they want, getting good angles on enemy targets and things like this. Now, the reason people love these things isn't actually because of their special weapons, because if they just had the special weapons and heavy weapons, they'd be okay, but they would promptly get blasted to pieces in short order, and these things are a little bit too pricey to justify if they didn't have this ability. Basically, they have a move, shoot, move ability. So after they shoot, they get to move 6 inches wherever they want to in any direction, which is extremely powerful on a unit that has access to long-range shooting, weapons with a 36-inch range. So you can have them in the backfield, pop out, shoot something important, and then hide, which is extremely insane. And again, these guys can take up to 4 special weapons in the unit, which can be duplicates, by the way. So you can take 4 splinter cannons if you wanted to, or of course 4 dark lances. They cost 120 points for 5 and 200 points for 10. And that, reduced cost for the full squad is to make up for the fact that you can't take any more special weapons over 4. As for their keywords, they have the fly and grenades keywords, so it can move quickly across the battlefield, even up onto ruins very easily, and can potentially deal mortal wounds at close range as well with the grenade stratagem. And just like most Eldar units, they have the Eldari keyword, so they can actually be targeted with a lot of Eldar stratagems and special abilities. So just keep that in mind for later. So as for their strengths and weaknesses, their strengths are they're very fast and maneuverable with fly. Again, like I said, they can get quickly onto ruins, fire at something within line of sight and range, and then duck back because of their 6-inch movement after they shoot. They have excellent damage with their weapon options for every unit type, so any kind of unit type you want to kill, they have a weapon for. And at the same time are very hard to target. As far as their weaknesses go, they're fairly squishy against indirect fire, so that is a weakness of theirs. They're about as tough as Aspect Warriors, but they're much more expensive. So keep in mind they are 120 points. Swooping Hawks are 75 points. If I lose a unit of Swooping Hawks to a bunch of indirect fire, I'm not really sweating it because they're only 75 points. Or Rangers or any other unit that's, around that same point cost. But if I lose 120 points to my opponent's indirect fire, that's a much bigger deal. So you do need to find ways of making sure that they survive against indirect fire, which I will go ahead and talk about later in this video. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to their combos and synergies. And this is really where I start to get really excited about using Scourges, because Scourges are one of the most synergistic units with the Eldar Index. So let's go ahead and take a look. First of all, I just want to mention this right off the bat. A subscriber kind of turned me on to this, told me about this, and I vaguely knew about it, but I truly didn't know how disgusting it could get. And basically, this is what it is. You take a unit of Scourges with the splinter cannons, right? And you use Blade Storm on them. So in combination, because anti-infantry, every wound counts as a critical wound, that means that every single wound you score with a splinter cannon and Blade Storm is going to proc that critical effect of a -2 AP. Now, this gets even worse if you combine this with plunging fire. So now, instead of -3 AP, you're hitting stuff at -4 AP. So if something doesn't have an invul save, they're basically going to die, right? Anything with a 3+ save or less is going to die. And if it has a 2+ save, unless it has a good invul, it's also going to be saving only on a 6+. Guide is also extremely powerful, allowing them to hit very accurately, even at ballistic skill 4. So that is the other thing you have to recognize about Scourges. Most of their weapons, unless they're assault weapons, are hitting on a 4+ with the heavy keyword. Now, these guys aren't going to be standing still very often to benefit from heavy. So that means they're going to be hitting on a 4+, which isn't great, right? That's not a great ballistic skill to be hitting at. However, most likely you're going to have a Farseer Skyrunner in your list, and you're going to want to cast Guide on these guys to make sure they hit. Doom is also very good, gives them +1 to wound. You do need to include Eldrad in your list, but it is a buff. If you have Eldrad in your list and you're running Ynnari, which, you may or may not, right? Doom is a significant buff for them. And Vipers allow them to ignore a target's cover. Again, basically a pseudo -1 AP. So when you combine all these things together, the unit starts to look extremely powerful. So just check this out. Let's put this all together. Either way, whether you're targeting infantry units or vehicles with dark lances or splinter cannons, you can move up to the top story of a ruin, shoot at -4 AP. So dark lances have a base of -3 +1 for plunging fire. They're rerolling all their hits with Guide, and the Viper is allowing them to ignore the target's cover. So a lot of vehicles are going to get cover too, and that is just not going to be possible. So if you want to fire at a Land Raider, take 4 Dark Lances, fire at that Land Raider. You're going to be wounding it on 4+. You're going to be getting rerolls to hit, and 1 reroll to wound because of Unparalleled Mastery. And then you're going to be hitting it at -4 AP because of plunging fire. If you're going against an infantry unit, you're going to be hitting them with -4 AP with plunging fire with their splinter weapons, so their splinter cannons and so forth. And then afterward, they can move back down and out of line of sight. Okay, so what is the role of Scourges in an Eldar army, and how do you make the most out of them? So Scourges, at the end of the day, are a maneuverable fire support unit that are adept at dealing heavy damage to infantry and large targets alike, depending on how you equip them. And again, you can basically equip them to deal with targets of any caliber, no matter what they are. So whatever your army needs, you can plug them in and fill that gap. They're at their happiest when they're blasting enemy units from afar and using their ability to duck back behind cover. And lastly, if you need to, they can even advance and score secondaries because of the fact that the Solarite has an assault weapon via the blast pistol, splinter pistol, or of course the shard carbine. So Scourges do have one weakness, however, and that is towering units and indirect fire. Scourges are notoriously squishy for their points, right? You only get 5 wounds for 120 points, and they don't have great toughness or armor. So if somebody does aim some indirect fire or towering units at them, they are going to disappear quickly. So if you find yourself up against a knight list or a list with a lot of indirect fire, simply put them in reserve. Period. End of story. Losing 1 round of shooting is better than losing them before taking a single shot. So I know they're 120 points, but please, by Isha, put them in reserve because they are not going to even survive 1 turn if you don't go first. Due to their deep strike ability, they're actually pretty good from reserve because they can easily get into safe positions to shoot and then move again out of line of sight with the ability. And by turn 2 or turn 3 when they come in, most of the enemy's big threats should be dead anyway. And at that point, the Scourges can have the run of the field. So some of you may be wondering, well, Proxy Hammer, I know everybody takes them in units of 5, but is there any value in having them in a unit of 10? And yes, there actually is, but typically not, right? Unless you plan on giving them splinter cannons. So if you want to run them as an anti-tank unit, do not field them as a unit of 10. It is wasted points. However, with the splinter cannons and shard carbines, they're spitting out 30 anti-infantry 3+ shots, some of which have sustained hits, right? Because of the splinter cannons. If you add Blade Storm and Guide to the mix, you're going to get some really insane damage out of them. Especially if they're able to get up onto a ruin and shoot an enemy unit below, or if you have a Viper to help remove an enemy's cover save. So occasionally, if you are using your Scourges for anti-infantry purposes, it is worth it to use them as squad of 10 because shard carbines are still very powerful anti-infantry 3+ weapons that proc Blade Storm on any wound they roll. And with the right buff setup, something like this could easily end up doing 20 wounds at -3 AP. Sometimes even -4, again, if you have plunging fire and you're able to remove the target's cover save. And that's insane, guys. That's really insane. Against a lot of infantry units in the game, that's going to absolutely delete them. So unless they have a really good invul save, they're pretty much toast. Okay, so in conclusion, if you are playing a Ynnari list, you absolutely have to try Scourges as they're super strong and synergize perfectly with the Eldar elements of your army. With a variety of weapon options to strike hard against any target, they make the perfect choice to fill gaps in your list. And that's really where these guys excel. If you want to save about 200 points in your list just to fill in the gaps where needed, these guys can easily fill that void. The best options being, in my opinion, the Heat Lances, the Dark Lances, and the Splinter Cannons for that insane amount of anti-infantry damage you can pull off when using Blade Storm. Now, I know that most of you are just going to use them for the Dark Lances and maybe the Heat Lances. I think both of those options are good, although the Heat Lances are a little bit riskier. But I would really consider using the Splinter Cannons as well. In my current Ynnari list, I'm not running the Splinter Cannons. I'm actually just running Dark Lances and Heat Lances for anti-tank. But I had a game the other day where I tried it out with the Blade Storm stratagem. And guys, it is truly insane. The amount of high AP anti-infantry 3+ wounds that you can push through on enemy units crossing the midboard should be banned. It really is insane, right? Now, normally Dark Eldar don't get access to something like Bladestorm, so in Dark Eldar lists, you typically don't see people running the Splinter Cannons, but in Ynnari, it's absolutely bonkers because of that stratagem. And I would even go so far as to say that Scourges make better use out of the Bladestorm stratagem than any other unit, bar none, in the Eldar Index. And that includes some of my favorites. That includes Wind Riders with scatter lasers. That includes Shuriken cannons. And that list also includes Shadow Specters. I know Shadow Specters are really good, but I have to say I think Scourges beat them out when using the Bladestorm stratagem, because of the fact that every single wound they score is going to be a critical wound, which is insane. So Specters may be more cost efficient and be better against certain targets and stuff like that, but the Scourges have them beat in the anti-infantry battle. At least as far as AP goes, because I know that Blast is really good against big units of 20 and hordes of infantry, but the Splinter Cannons and the Shard Carbines have the Shadow Specters beat when it comes to, heavier infantry with a 4+ or even a 3+ save. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you are a Ynnari player, you got to try these guys out. They're really cool. I mean, I've been running them for the past couple weeks, and they've been awesome in the games I've played, so you really do have to try it out if you're running a Ynnari list. Trust me. Thank you once again to all my patrons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last month. Your help has helped the channel improve and grow. If you do want to become a Patreon member and help support the channel, I will leave the link in the description for that. And I also do have free trials activated. So if you want to go ahead and sign up, it'll be totally free, and that'll grant you permanent access to our Discord community, which is a community of players who like talking about Eldar strategies, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I will go ahead and leave the link in the description. I also have a channel store page for those of you looking to grab some Eldar-inspired apparel to rep at your local game store, or Dark Eldar-inspired apparel. I've recently made a couple of those as well. If you're interested in that, I will leave the link in the description, as well as the link for my Amazon affiliate page if you want to pick up some discounted Eldar models. One last thing I want to mention real quick is that the channel's interactive campaign is currently going on. We've been doing it for about a week. We've gotten a few battles recorded, and guys, we're going to need some backup. So if you do want to join, you can either join via Patreon or one of the links below in the description, and we can get you rolling on that. At the end of every month, there will be a prize, basically raffled off to one of the participants. So, if you have or want any information on that, go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'll basically explain what's going on there. You can also check out the updates in the community posts, as well as my previous videos on the channel. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Have a great one, everybody. Have some great games this weekend, and I'll see you guys later. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.